Claire sat motionless in the middle of the living room, the soft ticking of the old grandfather clock on the wall, the only sound in the house. It was a sound she used to find comforting, the steady rhythm marking time as it passed. But now, it only emphasized the silence that had grown louder with each day since Michael died. Her hands rested on the faded quilt that covered the couch, a quilt she had sewn herself during one of the many nights she'd spent awake, waiting for Michael to come home. But he never did, not anymore. The house felt empty, too empty. The space that had once been filled with laughter, whispered conversations, and the quiet presence of a partner was now a cavernous void. Photographs lined the shelves, smiling faces frozen in time, reminders of a life they had built together. Yet in that moment, Claire felt as if she were the only living thing left. Outside, the wind rustled the bare branches of the trees, the late autumn chill creeping in through cracked windows she never quite managed to fix. She wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself, but the cold seeped deeper than her skin. She had stopped going out, stopped answering calls. The world outside seemed too sharp, too bright, too full of movement for someone who felt like a shadow, days blurred into one. Another, marked only by the occasional delivery of groceries or the mail left by the door. She found herself staring into the fridge, unable to decide what to eat, or worse, simply ignoring it altogether. Her daughter had called the day before, her voice shaky with worry. "Mom, please come visit us. You need people." Claire had wanted to say yes, to drive the few hours to see them, to feel the warmth of family. But when she thought about leaving the house, she felt like the walls would collapse around her, and the memories would flood in and drown her. Tonight, the loneliness was especially thick. She curled up on the couch, pulling the quilt over her like a shield. The quiet was suffocating. Suddenly, a faint knock at the door startled her. She hesitated. Who would be visiting at this hour? Peering through the peephole, she saw the shelter. "A volunteer, Mrs. Harris," holding a small bundle wrapped in a blanket. "Claire," Mrs. Harris said gently when she opened the door, "I thought you might like some company. And maybe this little guy could keep you company too." Claire blinked, unsure if she heard correctly. Mrs. Harris stepped inside, carefully setting the bundle on the coffee table. A pair of bright, curious eyes peeked out. "A small, shaggy German shepherd mix puppy. He's gentle and quiet. I thought maybe, someone to share your days with." Claire looked down at the puppy. For a moment, something inside her stirred, a fragile flicker of hope. The silence didn't feel so heavy anymore. Claire stood in the bright, bustling shelter room, her fingers nervously tapping the edge of the metal kennel door. Max, the young German shepherd mix with soft brown eyes and a calm demeanor, looked up at her with a tilt of his head, as if sensing her hesitation. She had never planned to get a dog, never imagined bringing a new life into her quiet, aching home. But something about Max, his quiet presence, his gentle tail wagging slowly, reached her in a way she hadn't expected. The shelter volunteer, Mrs. Harris, smiled warmly. "He's been through a lot, but he's a sweet soul. We think he'd do well with someone who needs him just as much as he needs them." Claire's heart tightened. She had been drowning in grief since Michael passed. A relentless ache that left her, numb most days. The house was full of memories but empty of warmth. Maybe Max could be the first small step toward filling the silence. She knelt down and extended her hand through the kennel bars. Max sniffed it cautiously, then leaned forward, pressing his head gently against her palm. The softness of his fur and the warmth radiating from his body felt like a balm. "I don't know if I'm ready," Claire whispered, almost to herself. Mrs. Harris nodded gently. "There's no rush, but sometimes the right companion arrives when we need them the most, even if we don't realize it at first." After a moment, Claire smiled faintly and nodded. I think I think I'd like to try. The adoption process was quick, and soon Claire found herself walking out of the shelter with a small leash in one hand and a cautious hope blooming in her chest. Max trotted beside her, tail wagging softly, eyes bright but calm. He didn't bark or jump, just stayed close, as if understanding the fragility of this new beginning. The drive home was quiet. Claire glanced at Max in the passenger seat, who sat alert but peaceful. When they arrived, she opened the front door, stepping inside the house that suddenly felt even bigger than before. Max hesitated for a moment at the threshold, then padded inside, exploring carefully. Claire watched as he sniffed around the living room, paused by the window, then settled. On the rug by the couch, it was the first time in months she had seen someone, or something, make themselves at home here. That evening, as she fed Max and watched him eat with a gentle enthusiasm, Claire felt a small spark of purpose flicker inside her. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't completely alone. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains as Claire stirred awake to a gentle nudge at her side. Max's warm nose pressed against her cheek, his deep brown eyes fixed patiently on her face. For a moment, she lay still, taking in the unfamiliar feeling. A presence beside her, a steady heartbeat that wasn't hers alone. The silence of the house was broken by Max's soft breathing and the distant chirp of birds outside the window. Slowly, she reached out and scratched behind Max's ears. His tail thumped quietly against the bedspread, a rhythm of comfort. Getting out of bed had been one of the hardest parts of her days lately. The weight of grief, like a thick fog, kept her tethered to the past. But Max needed her. His soft whine reminded her that he was ready to start the day. Claire moved slowly, but with purpose. She prepared a bowl of food for Max, who ate eagerly, but gently, as if grateful for the simple routine. Later, she clipped on his leash and stepped outside. The crisp autumn air was cold, but the warmth of Max's presence beside her helped steady her breath. The walks became a lifeline. Each morning, Claire and Max ventured around the quiet neighborhood streets, the world slowly waking up around them. The rhythm of their steps brought a soothing regularity to her days. At first, the outside world felt overwhelming. Neighbors waved awkwardly, children played noisily, and the hum of life seemed distant from her pain. But Max's calm confidence gave her courage. She found herself greeting Mrs. Jensen from next door, who smiled warmly and asked about Max's breed. "He's a good dog," Claire replied softly, the words feeling strange but right. Every little interaction chipped away at the walls Claire had built around herself. Back at home, Max's boundless energy filled the quiet rooms. They played gentle games of fetch in the backyard, the sound of Max's joyful barks lifting Claire's spirits, even if only for moments at a time, feeding, walking, caring for Max. These acts, simple as they were, grounded Claire in the present. They forced her to move forward, one small step at a time. There were still days when the grief hit hard, moments when the tears came unbidden. But now, when the ache threatened to consume her, Max was there. A soft nudge, a warm presence reminding her she was not alone. In his eyes, Claire found a quiet understanding, a silent promise that healing was possible. Together, they began to build a new life, fragile, uncertain, but filled with the gentle hope of routine, love, and the possibility of tomorrow. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk as Claire clipped Max's leash onto his collar. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of damp leaves and earth, a reminder that autumn was slowly giving way to winter. Claire's fingers trembled slightly as she gripped the leash. The world outside still felt vast and unfamiliar, a place she hadn't dared to explore in weeks. But Max stood steady by her side, his dark eyes shining with quiet encouragement. "Ready?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. Max responded with a gentle wag of his tail, stepping forward confidently. Together, they moved toward the front door. The neighborhood was slowly waking up. A few cars passed by, their engines humming softly. Across the street, a young boy chased after a soccer ball, his laughter ringing clear and joyful. Claire's chest tightened. Memories of Michael playing with their own children flickered like distant echoes. It was painful, but Max's steady presence kept her anchored. As they walked down the street, Claire noticed a few neighbors tending to their gardens or retrieving mail. Each greeting they exchanged felt tentative, but real. "Good morning, Claire," Mrs. Jensen called from her porch, waving a hand. "Max is growing fast." Claire offered a small smile. "Thank you. He's keeping me busy." The simplicity of the interaction was both comforting and strange. It reminded Claire of life before loss, the everyday connections that had faded into the background but were now slowly coming back into focus. Max pulled gently on the leash, eager to explore the smells and sights of the neighborhood. Claire let him lead the way, trusting his instincts to guide them safely. At the park nearby, Max's tail wagged excitedly as he bounded across the grass, chasing after a thrown stick with youthful energy. Claire sat on a bench, watching him, with a soft smile. For the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of peace. A little girl approached cautiously, holding out a hand to Max. "Can I pet him?" Max sat obediently, allowing the child to stroke his fur. Claire felt a warmth spread through her chest at the simple kindness. "Thank you," she said quietly when the girl skipped away. Walking back home, Claire noticed the world felt less daunting. Each step was a small victory, a reclaiming of life, piece by piece. Back inside, Max settled by the fireplace, his head resting on his paws. Claire sank into her chair nearby, feeling the quiet companionship fill the room. Though the path ahead was still uncertain, Claire knew she no longer had to walk it alone. Together, they would face whatever came next. The soft, golden light of the afternoon sun poured through the windows, bathing the living room in warmth. Claire sat curled in her favorite armchair, a steaming cup of tea resting on the side table. Max lay stretched out at her feet, his breathing slow and even, the steady rise and fall of his chest a soothing rhythm. It had been months since Max first came into her life, months filled with small steps, quiet victories, and a slow but steady healing. The house no longer felt like a cavernous silence, but a home filled with new memories and gentle laughter. Claire reached down and stroked Max's fur, feeling the familiar softness beneath her fingers. "You saved me, Max," she whispered. "More than you'll ever know." Max lifted his head, looking up at her with eyes full of trust and love, as if understanding every word. Her daughter had visited just last week, bringing the grandchildren along. The house was filled with the joyful chaos of children's laughter and playful shouts, sounds Claire had longed to hear again. Max had bounded around, tail wagging, effortlessly becoming the heart of their family's renewed warmth. In the quiet moments since, Claire often found herself reflecting on how much had changed. The grief that had once threatened to consume her was still there, a gentle ache in the background, but no longer a barrier. It had softened, transformed by love and the steady presence of a companion who needed her just as much as she needed him. She stood and walked over to the window, watching as Max lay curled beneath the tree in the garden, basking in the sunlight. For the first time in a long time, Claire felt a sense of hope, a belief that tomorrow held promise. Life would never be the same without Michael, but with Max by her side, Claire knew she could face each day. Together, they had found a new rhythm, a new reason to keep going. The house was alive again, filled with love, healing, and the quiet magic of a bond that could mend even the deepest wounds. Claire smiled softly, her heart lighter than it had. It'd been in months. With Max's unconditional love and the routine they built together, she was finally beginning to heal, and this was only the beginning.